Welcome to PWS United, a podcast for the Prader-Willi syndrome community, brought to you by PWSA USA. This podcast gives the latest news in research, advocacy, and family support by bringing together staff, volunteers, PWS treatment specialists, biotech and pharmaceutical representatives, caregivers, family members, and individuals with PWS. Our goal is to share education, awareness, and resources with those living with PWS and their supporters. Join us in our mission to enhance the quality of life and empower those affected by Prader-Willi syndrome.
Welcome everyone, Annie here. I'm solo hosting today because Carrie is off doing some incredible and time-consuming work getting us all ready for the upcoming conference in June. It's getting close and we're very excited. Today's episode is an absolute treat. I had the pleasure of interviewing some of our parents on staff about their PWS origin story. So like how they got initiated into the PWS world. We talked about how things have changed for them since the early days of their journey and some of their favorite ways to spread PWS awareness. Now y'all are used to hearing my voice, so I won't go too deep into my responses, but I just wanted to say that my favorite way to spread awareness is through poetry. I've written a number of poems talking about being Freya's mom and the different experiences and emotions that come along with that. And I've shared these poems in a variety of settings, like open mics, workshops, social media, on podcasts, and even speaking to students in high school and college classes. Through sharing these poems, I have made some beautiful connections with people and formed some really valuable relationships, whether they're with parents of kids with disabilities, people living with disabilities themselves, or just compassionate folk who appreciate someone being vulnerable up on the mic. It can be very nerve-wracking at times. It is a vulnerable position to put yourself into, and I've definitely had some tears up on the mic, but I've never had a bad experience authentically and openly expressing my experience of this PWS journey. But enough about me, because lined up for our episode today, we have Sarah Kasabi, Melanie Zalman, Charles Conway, Elaine Toll, and Christy Rickenbach. Remember that May 15th is PWS Awareness Day, so please spread the word. And if you're looking for ideas, we have our PWS Awareness Month Hub on our website. I'll link to that in the show notes. I hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day and that you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Kasabi. I am the Family Support Information and Referral Specialist at PWSA USA. And I have a 5.5-year-old boy with PWS, and his name is Khaled.
I want to know what your PWS origin story is. So I know that can be really broad and big, but if you could think back to like your introduction into PWS, if there are any like key moments or memories from that.
Yes. So before I had my son with PWS, life was completely different, right? So what you think of, like, you had a clear idea of what motherhood is and the joy and challenges of the first, because he was my firstborn, right? He's my only child, but nothing really prepared me to what it meant to become a mom, and especially for the first time, and also a mom of a rare condition, a child with a rare condition, like Prader-Willi. So I do remember my first memories were not the best. In the beginning, it was so overwhelming, so little information, so many questions with no answers, feeling lost, scared. Just having a newborn is hard enough, but then adding a rare condition to it with a little guidance from doctors, it was not the best memory, but everything changed when I found the association, though. So it's when I met
Yeah.
other parents who understood, who walked the same path, it just kind of changed my life completely.
Yeah. Well, and so that's the next question is, so you expressed in the beginning, you had a lot of fear, sadness, grief, isolation, kind of all those typical feelings. And when you look back at your beginning of this PWS journey, what has changed? How is it different today?
Yes. So when I met the association and I met other parents, everything changed. So I started learning, discovered about the latest strategies, research, just updated information, which I didn't have before when I was in the NICU experience. And most importantly, I found the right people to ask questions. I felt heard. So it really literally changed my life completely. And I want to say that my life right now is like right now, 5 years later, is full of hope. I see things in a different way. I've grown so much. I'm like I'm not the same person at all like from before before I had my child. You might not believe it. So for any parents like listening right now, I want to just tell them that it's you're not going to believe it when I say it now because I did not believe it either when I was told, but I promise you, you will smile again, you'll feel strong again, and one day you will even feel grateful for a journey that brought you so much hope and strength with your child. So it will be overwhelming right now. It will be difficult right now, but your life will change. Absolutely. And I did not believe that when I first heard that, when people used to tell me this, but I can tell you now, 5.5 years later, it is so true.
Since it is Awareness Month, what is your favorite way to raise PWS awareness?
Now that I am a little bit seasoned, still new to the journey, but I'm a little bit more confident. I know more information. I can talk about my son's diagnosis without crying. So I feel like there is a version of something that you can come up with when it comes to Predator because there's so many things and you won't just be able to like you won't be able to say everything, but you will find the appropriate thing to say depending on the situation and then take advantage of that and spread awareness. So I have literally a version in my head of my son's diagnosis to every community I go to because depending again like I don't have to disclose everything, and sometimes in that moment you just need to like you need to just prevent from the food, prevent a food situation. So
Mhm.
you got to just say quick, hey, we have like this, allergies to sugar, or oh no, we can't, we're like he has a metabolic condition, he can't have that. So something quick, and I literally have a version for each situation. But I also try to take advantage of these situations and spread awareness in a way also that does not hurt my son, but also in a way that is simple for people to understand. And it is very important to take those moments to spread awareness and explain to people in case they meet somebody with the same condition or in case they need to know. And that's how you build your community, and that's how you broaden more your support system because people need to know, and it's not something like to be ashamed of or to hide, but in fact it's an honor to explain that he has challenges but he's doing great and he's thriving. So people, that makes me proud of him more, and people need to know because that's the only way I can protect him is by spreading awareness. People need to know, and for everybody else that is probably not diagnosed or probably knows someone, it's very important for us, since this is a rare condition, to just take those moments and enlighten people and make them understand. And once they understand, they are on board with you and they support you.
My name is Melanie Zalman, and I am the Director of Development at PWSA. And I'm also mom to Josephine, who is about to turn 7 and living with PWS.
All right. So when you go back to the beginning, the start of your PWS journey and experience, is there like a key moment or a memory that stands out? Like, do you have like a PWS origin story?
When you asked this question, I got real like intellectual about it, and I started to like think about what an origin story is, and immediately I started to think about like superheroes. Did I get some sort of like radioactive PWS warrior mom spider bite and became that way? But no, it's looking back, the diagnosis, the labor and delivery, like all of that was so difficult, and there's things about it that feel like like a million years ago, and there's things that I can remember like yesterday. So I remember feeling like I became a special needs mom before I became a PWS mom. I remember very distinctly when I was discharged from the labor and delivery floor, deciding pretty quickly that I was gonna move, I was gonna room in, I was gonna bunk up with my daughter in the NICU. I had this horrible feeling about the idea of leaving the hospital without a baby,
Mm.
and I decided that I was gonna have to be there with her and advocate for her and ask questions and learn how to do things and not be intimidated from the get-go. So I vividly remember getting discharged as a maternity patient and, like, going home and gathering all of my stuff and kind of just announcing to the care team that I would be not leaving not leaving her side, and for the 44 days that she was in the NICU, with the exception of one night, I spent the whole time by her side, and I remember knowing that something big was coming and that whatever it was definitely gonna change my life and the dynamic of my family forever. And I remember, the neonatologist being just very puzzled about what was going on and trying to figure out this diagnosis. And this one doctor, younger woman, came in and she gave me this list and it had like 13 different random conditions on it. And I just so vividly remember her saying, like, okay, here's what we're working with. Like, we have this list of these are all the things we think might be going on. And we're gonna just keep, we're gonna start with the most common, most likely thing, and we're just gonna keep going until we get answers. And so there was, lab work after test. And I just remember the list getting smaller and smaller. And it was when the list was down to like 5 or 6 things that I was like, okay, I should really start figuring out what all this is because I don't want to be taken by surprise. I want to know what I'm dealing with. And I remember the diagnosis part being just very hard, very dark. We hear a lot of new families talk about like my neonatologist or my geneticist walked in with like a WebMD Google printout of, or something from a textbook with a paragraph about PWS and giving you kind of like very grim, bleak prospects of like what you could expect from your child. And that's pretty much what it was for us. And as dark and horrible and sad and difficult as that was, I also just remember feeling like I was so in it. I was so invested. I was pumping breast milk. I was, sleeping in the room. I was doing all the things alongside the nurses, which probably drove them crazy when I think about it. But I didn't want to not know how to get in there. I didn't want to be tentative about the tubes and the wires and the oxygen. I wanted to know how to navigate through it. And I remember always holding her and feeling like she was so tethered. Like there were all these
Mm.
things, tubes and wires and cords and monitors and all that sort of thing. And so I remember when they came in and they told us, and we were so devastated. And then I remember somebody coming to us later that day saying, well, there's this association that might have some resources for you. And so I remember calling PWSA and, very businesslike, kind of leaving a message. And then a couple of hours later, I got a call from Diane Seeley at the time, who was the parent mentor coordinator. And I just remember falling apart on the phone with her, and I remember it was the first time someone had said basically like, "Congratulations on your beautiful daughter." It was the first time I felt like I became a mom again. It was the first time I felt like there might be something, you know, good to all of this. And so right away, I got connected. I was on the Facebook groups that day. I was reading more. I was learning about growth hormone. And so I remember this turning point of kind of going from feeling very dark, very hopeless, very overwhelmed with all of this new information to then feeling like, okay, I'm in the right place, I'm connected to the right people, I have the right resources, and now I can start doing things. I can start, finding an endocrinologist. I can start figuring out what's our path out of the NICU. They wanted us to be able to feed her and it wasn't happening. And so we had to decide, do we want to get a G tube? Do we want to, how do we want to proceed? And being connected to PWSA helped me figure all that out. But something that's really critical to my origin story, I guess, and something that does feel a little bit superhero-ish, but there was this amazing mom who, I didn't know from anyone, and she private messaged me and she said, "I live in Massachusetts and I'm in New Hampshire, so Massachusetts is our neighboring state." She says, "I'm about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes from you, and I have a son also born with PWS and I'm still on maternity leave, and I would like to offer if you're willing to come up to the hospital and spend the day with you and just meet your baby and show you some pictures of my son and talk a little bit about what life after the NICU has been like for us." Not in any formal capacity, not on behalf of any organization, just this incredibly kind, generous person who I had never ever spoken to and never ever met. And I said yes, because I was like so desperate for human connection from somebody who could make sense of any of this. And she did. She sight unseen drove and left her baby with her husband for the day and came and brought her a breast pump and brought her snacks and her stories and her pictures. And I cried and I laughed. And I'm still connected with this mom to this day. But it was that sort of like personal connection, this sort of like kismet of feeling like it's that I was lost and now I'm found kind of feeling of being alone and isolated and not knowing. And then suddenly the kindness of this stranger coming to me and bringing me some comfort and some reassurance. And she had all these great pictures of her baby who had just started, smiling and, drinking bottles with a lot more success. And I just remember feeling like, okay, like I don't know what this looks like, but I'm gonna be okay. Like, I can do this. Whatever this is, I'm gonna figure it out, and I'm sure there's more people out there like this friend I've just made, who I still talk to, and then from there, everything felt less overwhelming. I got a parent mentor. I figured out, going back to work, I figured out childcare. And then before I knew it, I was figuring out kindergarten. I talk, I'm a parent mentor now, which just happened recently, and it's like an absolute honor to help new families. And I remember this woman I'm mentoring saying like, "Oh, and this feeding pump, and there's so many buttons, and I'm always worried I'm going to screw it up." And she's like, "Do you remember having this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know I had one, but if you handed it to me, like, I would not know." But there's a time in your journey where whatever it is, whether it's the oxygen or the feeding pump or the bottle or, whatever it is so vital and so critical. And you eat, sleep, and breathe whatever this piece of equipment is. And it's so integral to your life and to your child's welfare. And you can't imagine that there's going to come a time where you wouldn't know how to work it or what to do. But that time does come. I promise you. So that's my origin story, and, since then, PWS, I wouldn't say it's taken over my life, but it's definitely, become what I'm passionate about. It's become integral to everything. It's, my friends are my friends, a lot of them, because of their connection to PWS. My work, my job is centered around PWS, and I'm not unhappy about it. I love our community and I feel kind of like it's a little bonus. It's a gift for having to deal with some of the issues and adversity and obstacles that we have to overcome with our kiddos. So I feel like that's how we became a PWS family. And my daughter, PWS does not define her. I mean, I think about it a lot as her mom, but I feel like it's just a part of who she is. She's this like amazing, feral, outgoing, wild, boisterous, funny, sunshiny girl. And so, I try to not look at her through that lens as much as I possibly can. Mm.
I think that was all very well said, and you in that answered the second question. Um,
I'm an overachiever.
fantastic. You know, I was thinking the other day about how actually Facebook memory came up about a post about when Freya started growth hormone. She was 11 months old when I started giving her growth hormone, and I was terrified to give her that first shot. And my good friend is a nurse, so I went down to her house for like moral support. And then for like the first few weeks, I would wait until Freya would go to sleep so I could give her the shot. It was just like this big ordeal. And I just, like you said, like you think like, oh my God, I'll never get past this stage. And now every evening before Freya goes to bed, she goes into the kitchen, she gets her shot out of the fridge, she gives it to herself, and then she goes to bed.
You're so right. And I remember, I want to say it was Christy telling me, or somebody, I was asking somebody that has a teen a few years ago, like, does your child still take growth hormone? Oh, yeah, she takes it, but I don't give it to her. Like,
Yeah.
the idea that my child is going to play a role in like her own care in this way was such a foreign concept. Even today, like, okay, she's going to be 7 in a couple months. And this morning, she like 90% dressed herself. I mean, her shirt was on backwards, the bunny was on the back, but just, like, all these things that I was worried she wouldn't be able to do.
Mhm.
She's just, like, showing me every day, and that was something I decided early. I decided that there wasn't anything that I was going to believe that she wasn't capable of until she showed me she wasn't capable. Like, until she showed me she needed help or showed me that it was too hard, I wasn't gonna allow myself to believe it. And so every day she just shows me all the time how capable she is, and she's fiercely independent. Her line is, I'll say, "Do you want help with can mommy help you?" And she says, "No, mommy, I do it my by self. My
Oh,
not by myself.
right.
My by self." And so I'm just gonna let her do things my by self as much as she wants, and, she definitely self-advocates and asks for all kinds of help when she knows that she needs it.
All right. Well, before you go, since it is Awareness Month, do you want to tell us what your favorite way to spread PWS awareness is?
So you would think, and I hate to be like a dream crusher here, but you would think the answer to this would be fundraising. And while I do love a good fundraiser, and I'm so excited about yours, which I hope you'll share some about at some point, it's not fundraising. I love using the daily facts that PWSA shares, and sometimes, other organizations share different versions of the same information. So I try to spread the love. I love using those facts as a springboard to talk about like Josie, like how does it relate to Josie? So the other day there was a post about the different subtypes of PWS, and Josie has UPD. So I talked about, what is UPD and sort of like what does it look like? How does it manifest in my daughter, and how does it make her maybe different from someone with deletion or imprinting defect? So I like kind of using those, but making it personal. And people in my Facebook world and in my personal world seem to like really respond to it more when they see what the connection is between the information I'm sharing and my daughter. So I like doing that a lot. And it seems to resonate with people, and it's easy. It
Yeah.
doesn't take a lot of brain power or it's just a click and a couple of words. And I like that.
Yeah.
Keep
And I like
people
that you make it personal too, because yeah, that's what's relatable.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, awareness is really just about education. And for me, that just means that I'm being an open book with my community, whoever that is. And I like that when I post those things, people comment underneath or they send me a private message like, oh, I never knew this about PWS, or oh, that's so interesting, or where can I read more? And I really like helping people's curiosity by making a personal connection to Joe. And that seems to be effective.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Charles Conway. I'm an executive assistant for Prader-Willi Syndrome Association. I'm also a dad to a 5-year-old daughter named Angelica, who's currently living with PWS.
So can we go back to, I just want to know, go back to the beginning, kind of your PWS origin story. And if you could just tell us what that looked like.
For me, it's we were kind of different. Me and my wife found out at 20 weeks of her being pregnant that Angelica was going to be born with Prader-Willi syndrome. I found that as a blessing and a curse, so to speak. I'll say the curse because with it being my wife's first child, it was challenging for her. Nobody have their first child. They normally expect a kid with no condition, great, healthy. But again, unfortunately for us, we were told that Angelica was born with Prader-Willi syndrome. And when we found out, it gave us time to, one, do a lot of research, connect with doctors. And to me, the biggest point was to go through the grieving process before she was born. And with me, my wife was a little overwhelmed and she took it kind of hard. But for me, knowing that one of us had to be the strong one, not saying my wife not strong, but but knowing one of us had to be the strong one to be able to hold the other one up in times of need, it was upon me to be the strong one. And in the mindset I took was, even though we have this diagnosis, I was gonna not allow myself to get overwhelmed or bombarded with the thoughts in my mind of how my child will be when she's born. I wanted to just think that until I see it, I won't believe it. And once I see it, be ready to move forward and helping my daughter become the best individual she can from day one.
I love that. And I don't think anybody that's met your wife or even listened to her on the podcast, because she was on one of our first episodes, the BIPOC Affinity Group. Nobody would think that you're saying she's not strong. She definitely comes
Right.
off as a strong woman. But I
Right.
think that is the magic of marriage, hopefully, is that we take turns being the strong ones at times,
Absolutely. Of
right? Yeah.
course.
So looking back on the beginning of your PWS journey, what has changed since then?
A lot. I don't think we have a lot of time to even talk about every last, but I'll say this: from from the day of diagnosis, basically us getting told at 20 weeks of my wife being pregnant to today, a drastic change. Not only in our mindset, like I said, from day one, we've been advocates, knee deep into everything in the research, connecting with PWSA, connecting with the doctors, and always looking at how we can challenge our daughter, and not only our daughter, but her therapist, and making sure that they understand, like, hey, we want her to be as independent as possible. And our thing to them is, what are you doing to help me get there? So me and Janelle has been like strong together, making sure we a unified front when we talk to doctors, when we talk to the school, basically in every aspect that we have to deal with individuals associated with Angelica. And so strong minded in that regard. And for Angelica, going through the typical symptoms associated with Prader-Willi syndrome, she now can run, jump. She's speaking, like, I won't say clearly, but she has a ton of vocabulary. She can tell us basically what she want, when she want it, how she want it, what color she want, how many she want. And doing the physical activity, running, jumping, crawling, kicking the ball, throwing the ball. And then from an OT perspective, that's where our challenge lies still. She enjoys doing, coloring, but when it comes to writing, she's like, no, I'm not doing it. But I tell you, and also for her receptive and expressive, like I said, her expressive, like I said, she can tell us what she want when she want it. Her receptive, she's currently in pre-K4. She'll be in kindergarten next year. And we just did her transition IEP. And in talking to the kindergarten teacher about where Angelica lies, they're like, she's way ahead of what they would expect for a kindergartner. She knows her numbers, she knows her colors, she can count to 100, she can count backwards from at least 30, she can point out numbers, she can sing songs after hearing it only one time. So I'm just like, oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
You never would have thought that your child would reach those milestones or reach that level based on where they were when they first born, or when you got the diagnosis and Googled
Right.
and Googled what you would have to deal with. But I tell you, it's been great, although it's challenging. Like you said, nobody said you would go through life without challenges. And me and Janelle being people of faith, we always said, hey, the Lord gave it to us for a reason. He told us we need to take care of his child, because he could have easily been like, no, she's not going to make it or anything like that. But he did. So we take it as a challenge. Yeah, a challenge on us that we need to do what we need to do to take care of his blessing that he's given us.
Thank you for that. So since it is PWS Awareness Month, what is your favorite way to spread awareness?
The favorite way we like to, I'll say we, is it takes to me, especially in the household, all of us to make it happen. Me and Janelle, like everywhere we go, where we know it's going to be large groups of people, especially when we travel, we wear shirts. We wear our shirts, like the one I have on now.
Yep. Yep.
And what it does is it let them see that not only Angelica's fighting, that we as a family are fighting, down to our 2-year-old. He wears his shirt too. So they know everybody in this household is fighting for her independence. And then also on the back of the shirt, we have the website to PWSA. And then when we sit down talking to people, like if I talk on the airplane, I'm not talking about sports. I mean, I'll eventually get there, but I always try to bring it to two things. Either one, talking about Christ, of course, or two, always trying to bring it into talking about Angelica and PWS. Pretty much, like in the school, we know we have to do it. I'm not the one who likes to hide the fact that my daughter has this condition, because to me, education is powerful. And if I educate one, I'm hoping that they educate another, right?
Mhm.
I don't want anyone to be looking at my child and being like, "Oh man, what's wrong with her?"
Mm.
I want them to feel comfortable with me, with them asking me, you know, not making assumptions. So everywhere we go, we wear our shirts, and if people ask us questions, we don't shy away from them. We tell them like what the condition is, explain where our daughter, where she started and where she's at now, and also give them the website if they want to, research or find out more information. We put um, the sign in the yard that talks about May is Prader-Willi Awareness Day. We talk about it at school. We talk about it with families, and I'm coordinating with DC Now News to do an interview for Prader-Willi awareness. So any way that I can spread the word, whether that's writing an op-ed or doing an interview with anybody, I'm all for it. So every avenue, I'm open to try to spread it.
I love it. Well, thank you for your work in that. I'm of that same camp too, that we don't shy away from it.
Absolutely.
We've always talked about it at school. We talk about it with the friends because that's the best way to keep Freya safe.
Right. And
So,
bring about awareness.
mhm.
My goal is from day one, especially when I got connected to PWSA, is what can I do to bring the awareness to PWS, like cancer and like all the big, conditions that's
Mhm.
on TV, on commercials, and people know it just by saying what it is. That's
Mhm.
my goal, to try to get PWS to. When I say it, people understand. Oh yeah, that's this condition. Yeah, absolutely.
My name's Elaine Toll. I have a 39-year-old son who was born with Prader-Willi syndrome. And up until recently, I was a pretty active volunteer with PWSA, but starting in January, I started working for PWSA, and I'm an advocacy specialist with the organization now. So my son is 39 years old. He was born in 1986. So there wasn't a lot of readily available information at that point in time. He was born in a community hospital. They recognized right away that something was wrong. He was floppy. I'm medically oriented, but had never heard that as a medical term before. And so they sent him up to Dartmouth. I live in New Hampshire. They sent him up to Dartmouth, which is the academic hospital here. And I followed the next day. I had no idea what was happening. He seemed otherwise healthy, but wasn't eating, was sleeping all the time. And at about day 5, I walked into the NICU and there was a little note stuck in his bed. So of course I went and checked it out, and it said in pencil, it said question Prader-Willi syndrome. First time I'd ever heard of Prader-Willi syndrome. There was no one around who could answer any questions because the nurses were like, the geneticist wrote that. You'll have to wait for him to come back. And so when he came back, he told us a little bit about it. I remember feeling sad. I don't remember feeling terrified, which is good because we really had no other way to get information. But the geneticist did find it fairly early. The impact of that didn't really hit me until my son was about 18 months old. We were seeing a specialist in Connecticut every 6 months, and we went down to a conference. And I met a lot of older parents there who, when they heard that we had an 18-month-old who already had a diagnosis, they were just stunned and told us the stories that you've probably all heard from back in the day. Our daughter was 26 before she was diagnosed. We had no idea she was morbidly obese. She had all these behaviors that were a problem. You are so blessed. You're so fortunate that you have a diagnosis at the age of 18 months. And I think that's when it really hit me that we really were blessed, that we knew, well, at least we had a direction. We knew. He didn't test positive for anything for Prader-Willi for a while after that because they weren't the tests weren't there. When he was about 5 and a half or 6, we went to Connecticut to see the specialist, and asked us if we would have blood drawn that day. So my husband, myself, and my son all had blood drawn, and that was for fish testing, which is old-fashioned now, but now it was available. Fortunately, my son has PWS by deletion, so that showed it. So we finally had a clinical diagnosis, a more confirmed diagnosis at that point. But we had been treating him as though he had PWS right along.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so when you say at 18 months he got diagnosed, that was just by kind of like the characteristics that they saw in the clinic,
Well,
right?
really at that 5-day point, that was kind of the operating diagnosis. The geneticist kind of pegged it as Prader-Willi. He told us about Dr. Cassidy's clinic in Connecticut, and we started going there when he was several months old. I don't remember when we got our first appointment, but she agreed. She agreed with that assessment. When we went down when he was 5, I went down armed and ready, and we sat down, and I said, "I think he has this Prader-Willi thing. Look how great he's doing. He's
Mm.
really doing well. He had just started playing T-ball. He was doing great." And Dr. Cassidy just smiled, and she reached into her desk drawer and she pulled out an article and said, "We just published an article with 15 diagnostic criteria for Prader-Willi syndrome. Can we look at it together?" And I had kind of heard about the article, but I said, "Sure." So she went through the list, and it was yes, 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 yes. No, yes, yes, yes. So I think we said no. I know I said no to 1. I think I said no to 2. And so it was like, okay, all right, this is what he has. But really, we operated under that diagnosis from the time he was about 5 days old. Interestingly, the hospital we were in up at Dartmouth was a couple hours from home for us. And one day I was walking down the hall to go to the NICU, and I glanced in at the nurse's station, and my pediatrician from home was there. So he got looped in really very early. He used to go up frequently to either to do lectures or to take a class or something, and he happened to be there that day, and he was as surprised to see me as I was to see him. So he was great, and he just kinda got looped in really early as well. So we had a good team even though we didn't have any sort of PWS specialist until we met Dr. Cassidy, and we only saw her. She was my Dr. Miller. We only saw her once or twice a year.
Well, I love the connection because Dr. Cassidy is who diagnosed Freya when she
I
was
remember
out.
you.
Yeah, she was out here and at UCSF. So yeah, she's been around for a while. So when you look back at the beginning of your PWS journey and you look at it today, how is it different? What are some things that have changed?
Certainly the availability of information has changed. Someone, and I don't remember if it was the geneticist or my pediatrician, but someone told us about PWSA. The organization had been around for about 10 years at that point. It wasn't as well developed as it is today, but I did make contact with them. I got onto their mailing list. I still have in the closet right beside me old issues of the Gathered View, which was the newsletter at the time, which was hand typed by someone, and then copied, I'm sure. And I had what everybody referred to as the Blue Book, which was the book about Prader-Willi syndrome that was available at the time. So I had the information that was available to families. I didn't know any better because there was no other way to get information. So I kind of had what I felt like I needed. We knew he needed physical therapy, occupational therapy. We plugged into that when he was about 6 months old. So we had reasonably good guidance considering there wasn't a lot of information or a way to get information out there. Obviously, the difference with today is we're generations away from that world, which is kind of crazy. And the availability of information, you still can get some bad information, but the availability of information is out there. We have great organizations like PWSA and FPWR, so there's lots of good credible sources for information today, and that's a real blessing for today's parents.
So since it is PWS Awareness Month, what is your favorite way to spread PWS awareness?
I think the most widespread way that I do it once a year in May is do a post every day, a social media post. I usually just use Facebook, but we'll do a post. Some years I get creative, other years I grab the posts that PWSA does, or this year I've done a little both. I'm duplicating the PWSA posts on my page and kind of adding to it when it's not too invasive for my son's personal space, but to talk about some of the issues and the way we dealt with things. I talked a little bit a couple days ago about his diagnostic journey. And so I think that's the way that I try and do it. I've had years, last year in particular, I had so much feedback from people. It was really great. I reconnected with a high school friend who's a lawyer who actually had a client who's with the family had a child, an adult child with PWS. So we actually got on the phone together. We hadn't talked in a long time, and got on the phone together just to kind of compare stories. So I think that's probably the most consistent way that I do that. Of course, I'm working the advocacy space now for PWSA and had been doing that as a volunteer as well. And I think that's also a great way to do it. And when I do advocacy trips, I usually will put those out on social media as well to let people know what's going on. And it opens up a lot of questions from folks.
So, hi, my name is Christy Rickenbach. I am, work at PWSA USA as the Parent Support Coordinator. I have been here for 5 years now, and I also happen to have a daughter that has Prader-Willi syndrome. She is 21 years old. Her name is Justice, and she's amazing.
Yeah, she is. So, your PWS origin story. So, was there a moment or a memory from that kind of defines the beginning of the journey for you, or what was it like when you first started on the PWS journey?
So I could honestly go two ways with this. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I could like the day of the diagnosis, but I think actually what's more important is if I share kind of a couple months later when we took a trip to her neurologist and I walked in and I was so sad. And he looked at me and he's like, Christy, why are you so sad? And I said, well, my daughter has been diagnosed with this terrible syndrome. Everything I've read about it, is sad. And I don't have a lot of hope. And he said, you can stop right there. He said, because Justice will never know anything other than having Prader-Willi syndrome. So if you are sad about that, if you put that on her, she is going to be sad. But if you can love her for exactly who she is and you encourage her, she is going to love herself. And sometimes I look at her Instagram posts and I think we might have overdone it just a little bit.
Oh, I love that. I love that that you heard that from your doctor, because I think often we hear the stories of people saying their doctor said their kid's never going to walk or their kid's never going to talk, or these doctors. I think often enough it happens that they have kind of some story that they put along with it. Thankfully, that wasn't my experience either. But I've
Well,
heard
I did have that experience, but those are the experiences that I think that a lot of us have. But that is not, I mean, I've kind of almost blocked those out
mm,
now because what he said to me was far more meaningful. And it really, literally, I left the office that day and my whole outlook had changed. I'm like, dang straight, we can do this. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is nothing that's going to define who she is. And so we took that and we ran with it. We're just like, somebody said she's not going to, we're like, watch, sit back and watch. It might not be the same as everybody else, but she will do it. So I think that was the beginning, honestly, of our actual PWS journey. Because before that, it was just sadness and grief.
hmm sounds like a great doctor and great advice. So, when you look back at the beginning of your PWS journey and where you are today, how does that look different?
When I look back, right? So all of the information that was handed out when we were given her diagnosis, right? It was very bleak. And now there's just so much hope for the future for our kids, right? There are medications. A medication obviously was just approved. There's other medications that are in clinical trials right now that are offering so much hope. We know so much more about diet and what our kids can do versus what our kids were told they can't do. So I think just the outlook on everything is it's so much more positive than it was back in the day.
Yeah, I agree. So, what is your favorite way to raise awareness?
I think that advocating, going out in any form, so if that means heading to DC or sharing things on social media or any way that I can, right? If somebody, it's not like we walk around and like advertise, oh, this is justice, she has this. But if somebody asks us, what is, if we have a t-shirt or something, I will stop and I will share as much or as little information as I think people need to know. Yeah, it was, I used to not want to talk about it. Like, honestly, I would just be like, ignore people. I would just not share whatever. And then Justice and I had a conversation one day, and she's just like, why would I not want people to know that I
Mm,
have this? How are they supposed to help me if they don't know how to help me? So I was like, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And she's like, I'm not embarrassed of who I am. I hope you're not embarrassed. I'm like, oh my goodness, never. I would never be embarrassed of any of my kids for anything that they might have, that's different or whatever. Or, you know, as Justice loves to say, we all have something. She's just lucky that she has a diagnosis, so people know how to help her.
right.
So yeah, I just think just sharing, and of course, again, we don't have to share with everybody. Not everybody needs to know everything, but I do think that finding a way to advocate in your state or local, whatever, however you can best get the word out, because the more people know, the more people know how amazing our kids are.
Thank you for listening to this episode of PWS United. If you want to learn more about Prader-Willi syndrome and how PWSA USA is making strides in advocacy, family support, and research, visit www.pwsausa.org. And while you're there, we encourage you to sign up for our Pulse email newsletter to stay informed about the latest news, resources, and events. Don't forget to subscribe to the PWS United podcast so you never miss an episode. Our team is always available to support families and their loved ones living with PWS 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can call us at 941-312-0400 or email info@pwsausa.org. Catch a new episode next Tuesday, and until then, have a great week.